Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Philip Shepherd. So Philip was recommended to me by lots and lots of people, came on the Embodiment conference, was really impressed with him there. I think he was really one of the top speakers of the 140 we had. Ended up being so impressed, I invited him to Brighton to do a workshop, which doesn't, very few people get that invite. He's famous for working with the body and the environment. He's someone that really understands this word embodiment, the world of embodiment, particularly in relation to the planet and to nature. He wrote a book called New Self, New World, another one called Radical Wholeness. He's written an embodiment manifesto. So he is absolutely the right person for this podcast. Philip, welcome.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Mark. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And we always start the episodes by asking people how they got interested in the body. So what was your personal journey with this, Philip?
Whoa. Theater, I very, very early on in my life was drawn to theater. And then when I was 17, I'd been reading about classical Japanese theater, and a play came to Montreal. And I lived in Toronto, so I got on a Greyhound bus, 5-hour trip as a 17-year-old to this strange city. I saw no theater, and it shattered me. The power of this theater shook me to my core. And there were two things going on in me. One was just I didn't know how it had this effect on me. And I'd studied, theater. I belonged to a theater company in Canada, and something was happening through the body that was brand new to me. And I ended up making my way to Japan, mostly on a bicycle from England through Europe and the Middle East and India.
It's a long way around. Just to say to listeners, that's no N-O-H, right? When you say you saw no theatre, you didn't mean a lack of theatre.
I didn't mean not any theatre, yes.
Okay. Something on my mind was like, hang on, oh, no, okay.
So there I get to Japan, I'm studying no theatre, and I discover Hara. So here I am by now, an 18-year-old, encountering this intelligence in the belly. And I realized that is why I was so baffled that no theater had such an effect on me. I'd never in my life seen an arm raised, attuned to that intelligence. I'd never seen a head turn and see from that depth of the body. So that's really, when I trace my interest in embodiment back to its roots, that's a pretty good place to start.
Okay, so you were involved in theatre, you were in Japan, sort of Asian influences. Have there been any other sort of major influences on you as you've been on this journey?
Oh yeah, huge. I should mention Stephen Rumbelow. He ran a company in England called Triple Action Theatre. And he was working, this is in the 60s, early through the 70s. He was working with Eugenia Barba in Italy and Denmark and Grotowski, and developing what is physical theater. And he came to Canada, and I did so much work with him, and he became a very close friend. And I had the benefit of all that research in our relationship as he directed me in shows. And it was extraordinary. I can't imagine being where I am in terms of embodiment without that work. Another influence was a guy called David Smuckler, who remains to this day the finest voice teacher I've ever met, certainly the finest in Canada. And the journey, Mark, of undoing all the baffles and compartments that are trying to organize the voice. Because when you speak, I think we're instinctively aware that the voice reveals the whole of the body for everyone to hear it, right? And then, you can hear when someone's hiding their body and the voice changes like that, or when they're at ease in the body. And so I went through layers and layers of undoing over 5 years of private lessons. And that was a phenomenal, and that's work at such a subtle level, working with the pelvic floor, working with the sacrum, finding the release of the sacrum on the out-breath and the in-breath. So that was huge. And then the final influence I'd like to mention, there's a guy called Denis Chagnon, who was a police officer in Canada, which he should never have been. But anyway, there he was, and he got cancer. He was given 3 weeks to live, and he brought himself back to health by recognizing the pain in his body as energy and learning to move it and reduce the pain. And he developed a really, really potent grounding technique that just lets you clear the body's energy. And so I studied with him for 5 years as well. And that was another huge influence on me.
Mm. And I find this fascinating that people are coming to this world of embodiment, like the conference and this podcast, or meeting each other in different workshops from such different backgrounds. Like I've never studied Japanese theater or this kind of voice work. And it's kind of all coming together in a very interesting way now. The theater aspect is one that is just totally unknown to, say, a lot of dancers or yogis, for example. And there's, my colleague Francis Bryce is training this, Rachel Blackman we had on the podcast, one of the early podcasts. That we've had a few people from that kind of background, but there's this whole rich bodies of work out there, and they're only meeting for the first time now.
It's wonderful, and when I reflect on why theater has been such a potent force in my own transformation and development, whatever the culture, any technique, any exercise an actor is invited into will have value insofar as it's an exploration of how to be present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the bottom line. And so there are so many ways an actor explores that, and every one of them is transferable to standing at the kitchen sink washing your dishes.
Yes. Rachel Blackman, my EFC colleague, said she has a workshop called Skills of the Actor for Everyday Life, and said these are all things you can use in your life, and a lot of it transfers well into sort of leadership presence. I've seen in the business world as well, for example, because it's about being fully present, being fully authentic. And also, Rachel was talking to me just this morning, actually, of the challenges of being almost like dissecting your personality, in that we're embodied. Our personality is a certain set of kind of characteristics that's there, and actors really take those apart and really study them in some detail, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the longing, I think, in an actor is to transform, is to inhabit this other life, this other skin, this other rhythm. And for me, a lot of embodiment is about undoing. It's about, in effect, creating more and more space within the body through which the world can be felt, through which the world can resonate. So I really feel, in that regard, I feel the body is a bell, and I feel the present living in it and through it. And so, there's this culture in Africa that through books, I've never visited them, but through books have taught me a lot, and they feel the world in the body, and anthropologists describe them, it's the Ango-Ewe culture, describe them as having a radical indeterminacy of personhood. And you think of that, a radical indeterminacy of personhood, that sounds like a bloody nightmare in our culture. It sounds like madness. But I think what it is that, they're so grounded within themselves that they are moved by the world around them. They attune to it and are changed by it without resistance, without needing to hold on to that construct, that almost mental construct of this is who I am.
Because it allows for an openness and a resonance with whether it's another person's emotion, whether it's the kind of environment, which I know you speak a lot about. There can be that the resonating device is working as opposed to being kind of overly tightly held. Like it's like holding the guitar strings, expecting them to play.
Yeah, and I think one of the fallacies that the West has grown around is the idea that our truth lies, deep within ourselves, and that the truth of our being lies deep within ourselves. And I just find that untenable. My being is illuminated by relationship.
Yes.
That's, you feel a tree, you feel the sky, you feel another person, and you're illuminated by different ways by all of those.
Yes, and I think there are different understandings in the embodiment world. Some people are taking it from a very individualistic kind of Western point of view. I definitely see that in some yoga communities, a lot of North American teachers actually, and aren't necessarily seeing that, okay, we're embodied in relationship and in place, right? Like you can't remove the person from their relationships, culture, and place and say, oh, this is just this unit that can be moved around anywhere.
Yeah. That idea of the person as a unit, independent of the environment and the history, it relies on this. We in the West, we chase the idea of independence. We yearn for independence, and I understand that because if you could be truly independent, you would be isolated from any danger the world could bring your way. But independence doesn't exist. It's just a fantasy. There's no example of it anywhere in the cosmos. Everything affects everything. Everything leans on everything. Everything depends on everything. And so when you understand that it's a fantasy, then it links you to the work of Joseph Campbell, because he describes the tyrant of mythology as the man of self-achieved independence. And I think of that phrase, the man of self-achieved independence, and it could double for the American dream. That is what, the American psyche yearns for, urges.
The lone hero, so many movies, the lone hero doing it on their own, kind of it is.
Yeah. And also the multimillionaire or billionaire with, the mansion that's separated from the world by its perimeter fence and its security guards, and it's got everything it needs within it, its swimming pool and its bowling alley, and you never have to risk coming into relationship with a neighbor or the outside world. It's self-contained.
Yes. No, I was just in the oldest part of Lisbon, and there's this little streets, and everyone's so close together. People are hanging up their washing, having conversations across windows. People are cooking food outside because the houses are very small. And it struck me like the wealthier I've got in my career, the more I find myself like alone in a hotel room or alone with food. And then that is enabled by, like, I can now buy things at the shop without interacting with the cashier. I can order the food to my hotel from Uber, and I just have to, take the bag off the guy. And it almost seems like as the world's progressing, as it were, the technology is going in a certain direction, that independence becomes, the illusion of that becomes wider. And the wealthier one is, almost the more that happens as well. Like wealthier countries like Norway and places like this have problems with suicide rates. And it seems to be linked to the weather, but also to the isolation that people can afford their own flat and be in their own without those, that sort of, community that I was seeing in these little old streets of Alfama in Lisbon.
Yeah. And you know what? Community is bloody inconvenient.
Right.
A neighbor, you stop and talk to the neighbor, and then somebody wants to borrow a cup of sugar and you're interrupted. But those inconveniences are what weave lives together and enrich them. And our desire to be free of inconvenience is at the same time a a yearning for independence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Inconvenience births relationship and births new perspectives and new experiences.
And as you say, it is also just an illusion in that we're all into being. Every breath is connecting with nature. All of us were on an umbilical cord at a certain point. There's just an illusion that we can be completely separate.
Yeah. So then if you're going to live in reality, how to surrender that tug of the culture towards independence and drop down into the body. And what the body knows most intimately is that it belongs to the world. The body sees a tree and it understands that tree as kinship. It understands the kinship of the sky, the kinship of the ocean. It understands that. And, to me, the more retracted we become into the head and into that enclosed intelligence, the more we move from reality, the reality that is shared. And we grow up believing that we're alone. And that sense of aloneness is reinforced as we're taught to move further and further into the head.
And in this embodied perspective of connection and relationship, I mean, is there a risk in here of, it doesn't sound so dissimilar from some of the sort of socialist nightmares that I've studied. And it also, like, the great advance of Western civilization was to look at morality from the point of view of the individual. So you wouldn't be punished for something your group had done, for example. Like, group punishment is considered sort of morally repugnant in Western culture. And there's this sort of the beauty of seeing things on individual level. And when I sort of see, say, social justice approaches judging people on account of their group membership, for example, as opposed to their individual moral actions, I have certain concerns there. It's almost potentially sort of communist sounding, what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you for that. Embodiment doesn't mean a lack of individuality. There is no paradox between a lack of independence and individuality. What we need is a new model for understanding individuality. Individuality doesn't mean being cut apart from. My model, see if I can describe this. I don't know if you've seen a standing wave. So, you can take a rope and tie it off at one end and shake it at just the right frequency, and you get this beautiful looping and these still points between the waves that, the rope looks like it's both up and down at the same time in this loop, and then it hits the still point, and then there's another loop, and it hits a still point, and those still points are like you can put your finger on them, and the energy continues to run through it. Mm-hmm. So each of those still points is irrefutably an individual point, but each of those points is held in place by the energy of the world coursing through it. So you cut off the energy of the world and the still point disappears. So that individuality is what you grow into. Your personal resonance is what you grow into, for my money, as you deepen into the realms of the body's intelligence. But what you're addressing with the socialist nightmare, everything we know is top down in our culture. Any top-down implementation is a suppression and a reorganization of energy according to idea. That's the only thing we know. And that's not embodiment. Embodiment is not top-down. So to take a political idea, to take a dogma, to take an ideology and impose that in a top-down manner is absolutely contrary to embodiment.
Yes, and whether that's left or right or something else that I don't describe that way, it seems it is cognitive, like you are this, you're in this box, and I'm not you, and you're not me, and we're different, and you're the bad guys. Like, whether that's the left talking or the right talking, it's the same sort of top-down game, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And my feeling is that to deepen into embodiment is to join the world, to recognize that kinship. I don't think there's such a thing as embodiment that has a sense of being enclosed from the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you drop into the body's intelligence and join it and feel that unity with the world, you are opening to your own wholeness. You are surrendering to your wholeness. And to me, that's what we're missing, is any idea of what wholeness is in our culture. And we substitute so many ideals for wholeness. We take, the ideal of being compassionate, or the ideal of being merciful, or the ideal of having peace of heart. And any ideal that you have like that risks a top-down implementation. You go into a situation, you say, I should be peaceful here, or I should be compassionate here. And the head knows exactly what compassion looks like, knows exactly how it feels, and will start to implement the body's intelligence in a way that takes you there. And you're in a divided state. But when you do surrender to wholeness, in my experience anyway, you can be no other than compassionate. And you have peace of heart. And it doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means standing in your wholeness, and from that place saying no or yes, or whatever your wholeness carries you towards.
Interesting. And we've been using this word embodiment throughout, and I'm going to ask you the horrible question that everybody asks me at the beginning of every fucking interview I do, Philip, which is, and I think you're as well qualified as anyone on the planet maybe to answer this. So what is embodiment?
Yeah, to me, embodiment is an experience of your full intelligence. Now, your full intelligence is not contained within your skin. Your intelligence is born of a partnership with the present. And the body as a resonator hums to the present. The body knows 1,000,000 times more information than the conscious mind. And we're running around with this contracted intelligence in the head, trying to organize everything. And meanwhile, 1,000,000 times more information is there in the body. So to grow into embodiment is to grow into your fullest intelligence, not just as a contained entity, but as a partnership with the world.
And I like the rigor you bring to this conversation. I feel like the conversation of embodiment is maturing now. And one of the parts of that maturity is a rigor. So how is the word embodiment sometimes misused or misunderstood? Because I feel like we're probably on the same page. Like, if you go to hashtag Instagram embodiment, you'll cry, Philip. So, but it's like, what are some of the ways you feel like people are saying, well, is it the same as mindfulness? Is it this? Is it that? Like, how is it different? Why does it need to exist as a word would be another question.
Yeah. There's so many differences. Any modality that is brought into our culture will likely turn into a top-down modality. Whatever its origins, that's all we understand. So, mindfulness can mean sitting in your head, noticing the body, noticing the breath, noticing the grain of wood on the table you're sitting at, whatever that is. And there's value in that, but it's still sitting in the head. Yoga can mean making your body do these things for its own good. And so the top-down thing is just has its claws in us. Embodiment in our culture has come to mean listening to the body. Now you think about the metaphor of listening to the body, and the metaphor is telling you there is a wall separating you from your body.
And your body.
Yeah, you in one room, your body next door, and
Yep.
the best you can do is to put your ear to the wall, separating you from it, to listen to what's going on the other side.
It's like, hello, everybody. Yes, I'm here. I've been on a course with Mark and Philip, and now I'm paying attention. And
Yes, now I'm ready to listen to you. What have you got to say?
Right, we've allocated 10 minutes for this activity, Philip. I'm using my sort of old-fashioned 1950s BBC voice. It somehow seems appropriate for this, but it's spontaneously. So it's not just listening to the body or meditating on the body, because that's predisposing, saying, look, you're separate from it. It's still an it. And it's nice to pay attention to it or listen to it, but you're still you.
Yeah. So there's value, especially in an injury. We orphan the body's energy, and then there's value in paying attention to it in that way. But just don't mistake it for embodiment. To me, embodiment is about listening to the world through the body, and I feel this place now with a sensitivity and an attunement that nudges me forward, that I can, I can feel myself being guided by my relationship at the moment with you and with this room and with the sky above. And there is a guidance there that I, in the best of times, ride as a surfer rides a wave into shore.
So this is nice for really like this. So like right now, I could see embodiment as like I'm in my body, but actually I'm not just in my body. I am a body, but I'm a body in place and in relationship. So for you, embodiment is I'm not just like, oh, I can feel my feet, I can feel my bum in the chair. It's also that I'm feeling there's a felt sense of myself with you, with the abstract listeners out there. They're there in a way. Like it's different when we're on a podcast versus before we press record. And we're in a certain place and I can see the plant behind you and I'm feeling the chair here and the weather outside the window is changing from rainy to sunny to rainy again. And it's my wife's birthday and she's sleeping next door and we're having dinner later. Like that's all part of the embodied moment, right?
Yeah. And the other crucial part of it for me is that for me, embodiment isn't, well, my body is here and the present is out there. I think, I speak of the body as a resonator, and I think we stuff that resonator full of cotton balls and it stops ringing. And then we really feel a separation between out there and in here. And I think that as those cotton balls, with all that inner work that is necessary, as they're located and integrated and the body grows more and more spacious within, there's no longer the sense of the present just out there, because what is out there lives also in here. And I feel it most acutely when I feel it in my body. Yes. And there's that.
And this is a profound implication for like ethics, because it's not, I should be nice to other people. It's like, I am them, they are me. There's a mystical understanding there, but there's an embodied resonance just on a simple level. And the same with the environment, like Charles Eisenstein stuff and the environment. I was listening to again on the podcast the other day from the conference, and it's not, oh, I should be good to the planet because somehow it's good for me and, you're going to look after it. But it's like, no, I'm in a feeling relationship with the planet on a daily basis. So it makes as much sense as brushing my own teeth to look after the planet.
Yeah. I mean, the planet birthed each one of us. I mean, it really is in that regard our mother, and the top-down domination of the body, the suppression of its intelligence, the denigration of its faculties is exactly then what we apply to the world around us. I think our most basic, fundamental relationship is the relationship we have with the body. And if your relationship with the body is a top-down relationship, you will seek top-down relationships over your career, over your relationships, over your life in general, and over the world around you. And to move out of that top-down relationship and arrive in the body is to move into that place where kinship is felt in a pencil, kinship's felt in a leaf. And you see, I think we have a really basic misunderstanding of what human intelligence is. Because we've defined it as abstract reasoning. And when you give someone an IQ test, that's what you're studying, is their ability to reason in an abstract fashion. And you give them a number and you say, there's your intelligence. And for my money, abstract reasoning is an important part of our intelligence, but it's this narrow bandwidth on a massive spectrum. And I think through embodiment, we come to recognize that spectrum is first and foremost sensitivity. And I don't care if it's a sensitivity to truth, to a child's tears, to the sound of rainfall on a roof, to color. Any sensitivity is a form of intelligence. Now, the thing about a sensitivity is it's necessarily reactive. If the eye didn't react to light, we wouldn't see. So that reactivity has to be grounded. And groundedness, there's a lot of people throwing around the word groundedness. And I think it's important to understand that groundedness is what happens when something is embedded in the whole. So, lightning is brought back to the earth. But it's the same quality that, the flocks of starlings, the murmurations of starlings, those gorgeous shapes that shift and ripple and elongate in the sky. And you can imagine a lone starling out of sync with the murmuration, and then it joins the murmuration. And its movement is then harmonized by the whole, even as what it brings to the whole affects the whole in some measure. And I think that's the model for me of groundedness. So to ground a sensitivity is to bring it back to the body as a whole. And that there it is brought into proportion. But if we understood intelligence as grounded sensitivity, we'd understand that so many of our decisions are clever decisions rather than intelligent decisions. And the cleverness may make us more money. The cleverness may get us ahead in a realm of success that doesn't recognize wholeness. But to come back to it's demonstrable that as a culture we've forgotten how to live intelligently. And I don't think we'll remember that until we come back to the grounded sensitivity of the body.
Grounded sensitivity of the body, nice phrase. And so what's the cotton wool? Like, how have we forgotten this? There's a history here, both in terms of sort of Western global history, but also in terms of specifically as individuals. How have we lost this resonance?
Yeah, to me, it so clearly goes back to the Neolithic Revolution. So the Neolithic Revolution, we discovered agriculture, we domesticated animals, we built permanent settlements. But look at what happens when you take a seed, for the first time, you plant it in the ground. With that gesture, the entire shape of the world changes. So that ground is now your property. It's no longer just the breast of the Mother Earth. This belongs to you. And the little shoot growing up beside your seed, it's now a weed. A weed didn't exist until you pushed your seed into the ground. And that animal coming along, that's now vermin, because it might eat your plant. And vermin didn't exist. And the tree that's putting your plant into shadow, that has to be cut down now because your plant needs sun to thrive. So with the Neolithic Revolution, we staked our future on our ability to control our environment rather than to harmonize with it. Mm-hmm. And we assert that control with ever more increasing skill and effect. And of course, the greater we flex those muscles of control, the more we turn those same skills onto ourselves, and we try to control ourselves and make ourselves successful. And what you're dealing with the agenda of control is abstractions that grow and grow and grow from I can't eat this seed now because I'll need to plant it next spring, to email and Twitter and everything else. And as our world has grown increasingly abstract, our need to control has increased proportionately because we have lost our connection with the security of being, which we migrated from. And you can see that migration, in literature. You look at Homer, and Homer talks about Phren, Phren. And there's one translator, Richmond Lattimore, who preserves the sense of it, because Phren in ancient Greek meant mind, and it also meant diaphragm. The diaphragm is where they experience their thinking. So the center of thinking from the Neolithic Revolution in the belly had risen up to the diaphragm by Homer's day, and then by Plato's day, it's in the head. So you have a relationship to the body changing over time. The more we need to assert control, the more we divorce ourselves from the security of being that would render that addiction to control unnecessary.
So perceived separation, investing in control, starting with kind of the advent of agriculture, ownership, and then that developing through kind of industrialization, the information age. And it felt like almost to me like each of these layers is adding a layer. Each of these epochs, like industrialization taught us to see the body as a machine, to see ourselves as cogs in the machine. You'll still see this in modern gyms. The language is very industrial. Human resources in business is very industrial. And then information age is like, we're all just a computer. And you hear body say your body is like a big computer or something like this. And again, the level of abstraction is increasing even more with these two agriculture, industrialization, information age. I've missed a few, but it seems like there's an increasing, each one of those is adding a different layer of the disembodiment.
Yeah, and at each step, at each metaphor in that progression, we are flattering ourselves by summoning the machine imagery. And the flattery goes back to the fact that the only thing we completely understand is the machine. We've designed it, we can repair it, we can modify it, we can improve it, we can fix it if it breaks. There's nothing in a machine we don't understand, because the only thing that matters is its function. And so we thrust that metaphor of the machine onto ourselves, onto the world. And you can see, with hydraulics, as we developed hydraulics, they spoke of the fluids of the body, not vapors, but there's another word, and then as we developed cogs and wheels and pulleys, the idea that the machine was, the body was this mechanical thing, and then we developed computers, and the same thing. We want to think, the brain is the computer and the body is the machine it drives, and it's our need to control that makes us rely on the machine metaphor, because if we can understand the machine, then if we can imagine the body as a machine, we'll understand everything there is to know about the body. And it's a fallacious syllogism. It just does not work.
I don't know what fallacious or syllogism means, but I think
Mark, you do so.
I follow the general trend here. I feel like you're the Shakespearean version of embodiment teacher. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I'm listening to, I was taught in anatomy, this pulls this, and it's like a lever. And then, when I speak to really high level yoga teachers, they're like, no, it doesn't work that way. It's not a lever. There's, the fascia, and there's the fluid dynamics, and it's way more complicated than the sort of basic sort of machine metaphors that I was taught. Plus there's mystery. And they used to say in the machine metaphor, the sort of mystery is kind of taken out completely. Or they used to describe the brain as like the telephone exchange. I know older people that say, oh, this is how it was taught in school in the 1950s. And then before the computer was really widespread, it was taught as a telephone exchange. It's always that latest technology we have that it's being described as.
Yeah, and the mystery, mystery is anathema if your agenda is control.
Yep.
It is just intolerable. And the reality is that all there is, in a sense, is mystery. Behind everything that you think you know lies a deeper mystery. And intelligence itself. Again, we want to contain it within the brain the way programming is contained in a computer. But you look at nature, and that's not what intelligence is. There are phenomenal stories about harvester ants and how a colony works. There's this great researcher, Deborah Gordon, who's God bless her, for 30 years went to the same patch of desert in Arizona to study harvester ants, which sting, by the way. But her research upended our understanding of how a colony works. So it's not that the queen is in charge. No ant is in charge. No ant ever gives another ant a command or an instruction. So it's completely unmanaged. And yet it operates with a harmony that defies a sort of simplistic understanding of emergence. So intelligence isn't a phenomenon that is built up of bits and pieces. Intelligence is a phenomenon that emerges when an organic unity comes into being, whether that's a cell or whether it's an organ or a human being or a tree. And that intelligence is more than simple rules. So the researchers who say, well, ants have simple rules, and that's how this emergent intelligence leads to such sophisticated behavior. But there are times, like Deborah Gordon talks about, watching this one ant colony, and it's just before the monsoons come through, and these ants are building a little turret around the entranceway to the ant colony. Now, these ants weren't alive a year ago. It's not that they remembered, about this time last year, there was a lot of rain. Let's build a turret. They don't know what a turret is. And if all the ants had come to build a turret, it would have been a disaster. If not enough had come, it wouldn't have been built. Just the right number came and built a turret. The rains came and the ant colony wasn't flooded. So every ant is guided by, for lack of another word, a field of intelligence that they don't understand, that they don't name. They just feel its guidance and follow it. And, if we insist on contracting human intelligence into the cranium, we are losing an awareness, losing a sensitivity that could guide us in every moment. And it's a sensitivity that doesn't just belong to people, it belongs to life on earth. And it's there offering its guidance. And meanwhile, we're so busy with the white noise in our heads that we're oblivious to it. It's like Findhorn. We were talking about Findhorn and the way they were guided to grow these massive vegetables in land that was considered barely arable.
What would it be like then? Because I often hear people say, oh, the world's so terrible right now, and there's this kind of feeling it's worse than ever, which I don't really buy. But I think it's nice to have a positive vision as well. Like, what would a world where we were as tuned in as the ants to our own embodiment, this embodied wholeness, as you call it, how would that world be?
I mean, everything would change. Relationship would become more important than money, I think. What we value most highly, what we reward most highly in our culture, is the person on top making the decisions. And I think that would change, and we would reward nurses and people who teach our children. They would be like the models, the heroes, and people who work the earth, without contaminating it. I was reading about the insect holocaust, where we are losing the insect world because of the insecticides, largely, not exclusively, that have been used. And so people, we are what we miss in our culture, because we're so hedonist, we're so attached to the tyrant's fantasy of independence. We lose an expression through our human nature of nature itself. So if you look at nature, you realize, there are three things that nature unquestionably loves. And one is change. There is not a moment in nature that is the same as the one before. The sap is moving through the tree, the leaf is growing, everything is changing, and there's no moment that is duplicated. Nature loves diversity. It's not interested in making a snowflake the same as another one. It's at play. It's making new flowers. It's everything that's alive is part of an evolution. And nature loves service. There is nothing that is born that is not born into service. The earthworm burrowing in the dank earth, the bird singing on the tree branch, everything is in service. And when you attach to that fantasy of independence, all of those become reversed. So you resent change because it's messing with your plans. And you fear diversity because it can't be controlled. And you want to control things, you need a certain amount of conformity. And you serve only yourself. And it's an impoverished existence. And I think with a deepening into embodiment, with a deepening into wholeness, that would be recognized. And the simple things in life would bring the greatest pleasure.
Beautiful. And was this the essence of your manifesto? I, for a while back, was saying, hey, I should write a manifesto on embodiment. Someone said, Philip got there first. And I was like, damn, okay, kind of cool too, though. So, maybe you can say a little bit about that, because manifesto, it's very political sounding. It's very revolutionary. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your manifesto.
Yeah, I do state in the manifesto that I believe the most political act you can make is to become embodied. And, populism, which is rampant in the world today, is born of an energy that is, to my mind, unintegrated. It's not whole. And it's partly our education system, which is so grossly disembodied. It's almost that the school system we live with is designed to separate our thinking from our being.
Yes.
The premise being that if you can just shut down all that noise below the neck, you can think more clearly. So the premise is that you can think more clearly with a small segregated portion of your intelligence than you can with the whole of your being.
I think of the effort we spend in forcing children to sit still. Now, I've worked a lot with children. Getting them to sit still is fucking hard. And the huge amount of energy that goes into getting children to sit still is just at a certain age, particularly before it's conditioned, is absolutely huge. And I remember I used to ask one of my school teachers, do you mind if I just go for a walk in between doing this piece of work because I'm finished and I just want to clear my head? And the school teachers would find that the strangest request. And as you say, it's almost like an indoctrination process to not an easy one to achieve in many ways.
No, it's not easy. It's a tough road to hoe. But you understand eventually that to suppress the body's energy is to suppress the body's intelligence. There's no other way of having it. And so the Embodiment Manifesto looks at how rampantly top-down our culture is, our economy is. Our economy is madness. And capitalism itself, the word capitalism comes from the Latin word for head. So literally, capitalism is headism. And that resonates for me because what capitalism appeals to is the values of the head. And so capitalism, the problem with capitalism is that we've developed economies that have to grow or it's a disaster. And the population has to grow to support the economy or it's a disaster. The GDP has to grow or it's a disaster. And you know what? It's a finite planet. It's heading for disaster. That there's no way a finite planet can sustain infinite growth. And you know, I'm not saying I have the answer, but I do know that if we come back to the body and come back to the world that the body knows so intimately, we cannot hold on to the values of independence and economic bottom line, and I mean the crap that we churn out in the name of consumerism. You know, my mother's washing machine ran beautifully for 35 years. I bought a washing machine, and after 8 years, it died and was irreparable. It couldn't.
8 years. That's a lot longer than a phone lasts these days.
Yeah. I mean, that's the sad part of it. We call ourselves a materialist culture, but it's almost the opposite. It's like we don't care about material. Yeah. We turn the world into garbage as quickly as we can.
Yeah. If I look at, say, my best friend who's a carpenter and he makes a table and it takes him weeks to make it, but he's expecting it to last for generations. He gives it to a family and says, look, here's your table. It costs a lot of money because it took me a long time to make. You'll have it forever, assuming you protect it from woodworm or whatever. This is going to be at least your grandchildren will be eating around this table.
Yeah,
that's materialism in the most beautiful sense.
And the table will acquire history of the family that's gathered around it. And there'll be little nicks on it and little stains, and it'll hold that history within its grain. And what a beautiful thing.
Mm.
But if I had $1 billion, I would start a company that made appliances that were infinitely repairable, that were simple to use and beautiful to look at. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't seem to be popular. And then what would happen is instead of turning stuff into garbage, people would be employed repairing things and keeping them going. And anyway, that's all of that is implicit, if not explicit, in the Embodiment Manifesto.
Nice. You've alluded to it a few times. I particularly like your use of language and you talk about capital, like the capital of a country means the head of a country. Or we talk about the head of a company, literally, like, there's a way in which like our language is really showing this privileging of the head, isn't it?
Yeah, through and through. I mean, you want to rise to corporate headquarters. You want to have a good head on your shoulders. You want to get ahead in life. There's no end to it. And even more deeply buried in the fabric of our thinking is a value system that tells us that up is good and down is bad.
Yes, heaven is above, hell is below.
Yeah, and you're looking up today and he's looking a little down. And in another culture, he's looking a little down could mean he's looking at peace with himself and at rest on the earth. And you're looking up today could mean you're looking a little disconnected. What's wrong? But no, in our culture, there's no ambiguity. We know what it means. And that mirrors the way we live in the body. Our energy goes up and up and up. And in times of stress, we seek refuge in the head, and our energy climbs higher and higher. And it's counterproductive. If you let the energy go deeper and deeper, you come more fully into harmony, into a state in which you're able to respond with efficiency and clarity to whatever the situation is. But up is good. And, the North Pole is up only because the world was mapped by Europeans who lived in their heads in the north and wanted to be on top. The South Pole is every bit as much up as the north. But,
this is Australian maps that turn things around.
Yeah, which is so...
It's a sphere in space where there's no up anyway, so even the South Pole being up is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say when I see science fiction movies and all the spaceships are sort of on a plane, I go, hang on a minute, shouldn't some of them be, Anyway, so I hear you speak beautifully about this. And actually, honestly, Philip, for me, it's like hearing you talk about embodiment. It's like going to watch a Shakespeare play. I'm really looking forward to hearing you speak more in Findhorn and in Brighton. We'll get this podcast out before both of those things, so people can find those on the internet down in Brighton or up in Scotland for those that are in the UK. Obviously, Findhorn is the head of the country, so Brighton down below is much more embodied.
But I'm also in Wales on the same
beautiful
in Newport. Yeah.
Oh, Wales is nice. Well,
I've never been.
Wales is a wild country. It's, for those listeners, it's got a Celtic feel to it that England doesn't have. I was just in the national park Snowdonia in Wales, and it's got this slightly, like Ireland, it's got this slightly magically Celtic-y feel that you won't get around the home counties of London. But so there's this framing, which is wonderful, this beautiful language around it. Let's get kind of nuts and bolts here. So what are the kind of some of the concrete, how do you lead people back into embodiment to get rid of the cotton wool, as you said earlier? Like, give us some examples of some of the things people might do if they came to a workshop with you, rather than just talk about embodiment.
Yeah, no, I don't. The workshop is all experiential, and it moves through 4 themes. And the first theme is breath, and at the essence of that, every exercise in the workshop is designed to expose a pattern that our culture has laid into our neurology that we are not aware of, by and large. When you're not aware of a pattern, you have no choice, right? You don't even know it's happening. So to become aware is to acquire choice. And, there's so many ways. In breath, we stop our breath unconsciously in so many ways. If when people stop to think, as I'm doing now, they hold their breath. I mean, it's what we're used to. It's what's modeled for us. But if you're stopping your breath and you're not aware of it, you are giving your allegiance to doing in a way that sacrifices being. Because breath is the primary means by which you remain in touch with your being. And to intermittently put your breath on hold is to enact and replay a divorce between your thinking and your being over and over. So then what does it mean to allow the breath to flow without interruption? Just to feel it, just to experience it. And what does it mean to allow the breath to release from the whole of your body? Because I would never say there's a correct way of breathing, because every moment invites a different response. But my guiding principle is the whole of your body available to the breath? And you can feel the breath arise from the soles of your feet. You can feel the breath through the back and the arms. And when we speak, if the whole of the body is releasing to the breath, then the breath has the quality of a sigh as it leaves the body. And you can feel the difference between someone who's allowing that release of the whole body on the out-breath as they speak, or someone who's speaking like this and there is no release of the whole body, because that would just confuse things anyway. I mean, it's a horror to listen to, right?
Right.
But it's what's modeled for us. It's what we grow into. And then you have the possibility of making another choice. So there are exercises that bring awareness to the breath, bring awareness to areas of the body that are just cast into neglect by our culture. I feel these axes in the body that for me fall along a male-female complementarity. So I really feel the intelligence in my head as the male expression of my intelligence, and it gains perspective, and it's analytical, and it systemizes, and it sits at a distance from the world, which is necessary for perspective, right? You can't have perspective when you're in the middle of something. You need a means of achieving a slight distance. But then the intelligence in the pelvic bowl is the other pole of that, and it is relational. It attunes to wholeness. It doesn't rely on language as the intelligence of the head does. And they're meant to be in harmony. And the other axis we're familiar with is right left, where the right tends to be dominant. The left is, our word sinister actually means left. So in the same way that the left side of the body is demeaned and the intelligence in the pelvic bowl is shamed and demeaned, the intelligence of the back we lose. And we lose the breath in the back. And the breath in the back is the most potent reservoir of breath in the body. And so in the workshop, we begin to feel that and open the back to the breath. And it's just when the back softens to the breath, there's a sense of inclusiveness. I can speak from the front of my body, and it makes me feel separate from the world. And when I allow the breath into the back, it just softens into an embrace. It's such a different quality.
Mm. And embodiment can sound very complicated, but if we look at it from just the 3 dimensions, it's like, okay, down, back and in, or down, back and left, if you're looking at that left and right rather than in and out. That's very straightforward in many ways. Like, hey, we're up in our heads, not down below. We're a little forwards rather than being back in ourselves, and a little out rather than necessarily being able to be in as well. And it's quite simple yet profound. The same with breath, right? Like, I'm shocked at how much I notice my breath is constrained. And as a result, my psychosocial, emotional, spiritual self is directly contained. And I'm like, wow, I'm like walking around like in chains. And I didn't even realize until I let it go in that yoga class or in that walk in the woods or whatever.
Yeah. And so all the work in the workshop in a way is dead simple. Can you feel the breath in the back? Let's look at that. If I put my thumbs there, can you feel that? And everyone finds it. And it's like, it's so much fun for me because that newness of discovery happens with every workshop, and it's just so gratifying to be witness to that. The other big thing, well, there's breath, there's rest, like rest, how to land in the body. It's one thing to talk about embodiment, and you should be in the body, but if you don't know where to land, how are you going to stay there? You're just going to pop back into the head. So to bring the pelvic floor into awareness, and to feel the breath on the pelvic floor, and to land there and feel as you land there that sense of coming home to yourself, of coming home to the present. And that quality of rest, without that still point, you cannot feel wholeness. It's like a still pond will reflect the world beyond in all its wholeness. And if the pond has got a bit of a chop on it, you just get bits and pieces of the world reflected. So without that landing place, without that recovering that point of stillness, I don't know how you can stay in the body. And so there's the theme of rest. There's the theme of receptivity. I really see an equivalence between presence and receptivity. And I think we struggle a little to be present. in part because we think of presence as something that can be achieved within our skin. We've lost the preposition. I think you can only be present to. I can be present to you in this moment. I can be present to my breath. I can be present to the world outside the window. But without the to me, presence loses relationship and so becomes abstract. So to find an equivalence between receptivity and presence, I can explore just receiving. And for my money, if I'm fully present to you, I'm fully receptive to you. If I'm fully receptive to you, I'm fully present to you. And then the interesting thing is, if there is this equivalence between presence and receptivity, our model of speaking is a model that leads to disembodiment, because we imagine that when we talk to someone else, we are delivering our ideas or our opinions or our point of view. And in that delivery system, we stop receiving. If you're not fully receptive as you're speaking, then you're not fully present. And that's backwards for our culture. And so then in the workshop, we explore what it means to be in a state of full receptivity, even as you're speaking words. And that just opens doorways. It opens possibilities.
Okay, well, we're nearly on time. So a couple of things to finish. Very practically, where can people find you on the internet?
I have a website that's curiously called philipshepherd.com.
You managed to get it. We should spell Shepherd because there's different ways to spell it, right? So it's
there are. Thank you. Philip is with one L. That's the first stumbling block. And shepherd is spelled in exactly the way you'd spell the word for the guy who looks after his flock of sheep. SHEPHERD.
Great. And there's a nice website, actually. There's stuff on there like the manifesto we talked about. There's articles. All your workshops are listed on there, so people can find that there. And they'll find the workshops in Wales and Findhorn in Brighton, I'm sure, just by Googling as well. So, maybe we'll meet some of the listeners in person. In Brighton, we're hosting Betsy Politin, who's a really experienced trauma therapist, and one of the other people who was a great hit from the conference just before you. So people could come for sort of Betsy and then you the next day, which would
what could be better?
Quite a treat, quite a bag of goodies. So Philip, this has been excellent. I've really enjoyed it. Do you have a parting message about the body for all our listeners?
The head brings us into known relationship, and we struggle to know everything around us. The body brings us into felt relationship. To me, the essence of felt relationship is the quality of gentleness. It's what enables you to feel as clearly as you can. So, if you're moving a baby's arm into a sleeve, it's the gentleness that brings you into felt relationship with that and lets you guide it easily. It's contrary to our culture, but to allow yourself to feel gently is to move out of the head and into the body.
Beautiful. Philip, I'm so looking forward to spending more time with you. This has been great, a good warm-up. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a joy. Thank you so much, Mark.
Subscribe to get more. And you can also leave us a review on iTunes, which helps with our rankings. So really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support the podcast even more, then fund us. Go to Patreon. Give us $1 per episode. Those who don't know, Patreon's a really good way of supporting things you want to see more of in the world. I know so much is available for free now, and what I'd say is a lot of energy and effort goes into this podcast. I put it out there for free so everyone can get it. Maud and I work on this. Everyone that wants it can have it for free. And if you want to support us, it is really appreciated. So it's patreon.com/Mark Walsh. And of course, if you want any in-person training, you can visit embodiedfacilitator.com. There's loads more resources there too.
Till next time, welcome home to the body.